Parents must give children room to express themselves, to discover their world, to try a new adventure, gradually releasing them to live independently. Let the rope out. Overprotection frustrates and angers a child. We live in a world where that's a tendency among Christians. Keep them under your control all the time. You have to be very careful about that, or they become exasperated. Secondly, you can do it by favoritism. Isaac favored Esau over Jacob. Rebekah favored Jacob over Esau, and the sad results are well known. Don't compare them against each other. They're each unique. Love them the same without regard for each, without special regard for each. No respect of persons. If a child feels that you love another in that family more, that is a very, very frustrating experience. Thirdly, you can cause a child to become angry by setting unrealistic achievement goals. Pressure to excel in school, pressure to excel in sports, in music, in any activity they do. And it really has little to do with the child and everything to do with the reputation that the parent wants. This becomes very frustrating when the child has no sense of having reached a goal, no sense of having fulfilled an expectation. It leads to being angry and bitter. And I have dealt with such children. I have dealt with such children who have killed themselves. I think of one girl in particular who killed herself to get her parents off her back. She never could accomplish enough to satisfy them, and she was so angry she wanted to hurt them in the most profound way she could, so she took her life so they would have to live with the pain of causing that. Devastating. You can frustrate your child to anger by overindulgence, by giving them everything they want, by picking up after them always, by allowing them to throw all responsibility and accountability on others. You can exasperate them by letting them sin and get away with it, so they learn to do that successfully. Ultimately, when they face the world and people don't serve them and don't take all the responsibility for them and for their misdeeds, they will get angry and bitter and violent. It's just exactly the kind of generation we're seeing raised today. Fifthly, you can exasperate your child by discouragement. And I think that comes in two ways: lack of understanding and lack of reward. Because both of those destroy motivation and they destroy incentive. You must understand your children. Understand what they're thinking. Understand what they're trying to accomplish. Understand why a certain thing happened, why a certain behavior occurred, why a certain incident went a certain way. Grant them a listening ear and an understanding heart, and reward them graciously and generously with love. Give them approval and honor, and be patient with them, or they get very defeated and discouraged, and that turns to anger. You can provoke your children to anger, number 6, by failing to sacrifice for them. In other words, by making the child feel like he's constantly an intrusion into your life, constantly an interruption, always a bother. You want to do what you want to do. You and your husband want to go where you want to go. You just farm these kids out somewhere. Leave them. Let somebody else take care of them. You're not about to change your lifestyle. You're going to do what you want to do. You're going to have your fun and your pleasure, and the kids are just going to have to fend for themselves. Leave them, make them prepare their own meals. Don't take them places because you can't be bothered with them. And they will resent your being uncaring, unavailable, and self-centered. And it's one of the things that I'm so very thankful for in my own family is Patricia's devotion to our children all the years when they were growing up in the home. Many years when I had to be going and traveling, and she refused to do that because she wanted to be with those children all the time. Number 7, you can provoke your children to anger by failing to allow for some growing up. What does that mean? Let them goof up a little. Let them make mistakes. So they knock something over at the table. Laugh it off. They just don't quite have the manual dexterity yet, or the coordination. Give them a little job, and if they do it in an unacceptable way, but it's a little bit of progress, commend them. Let them share some of their ridiculous ideas. Let them plan some silly things to do and do them. And don't condemn them. Just expect progress, not perfection. The best of men are not perfect. The New York Tech, many years ago, defeated Rensselaer Poly 21-8. In that game, the only Rensselaer touchdown was set up by a 63-yard pass play, says the newspaper. On the play, there appeared to be a breakdown in the Tech defense. The next week, when reviewing the films, Tech coach Marty Sinal noticed that the defensive back on the play, freshman John Smith, stood frozen on one spot while the receiver flew by him for the winning touchdown. "Hey, Smitty, why didn't you move?" the coach yelled. Said Smith, "I couldn't. My contact lens had just popped out. And I covered it with my foot, waiting for a time to put it back. If I had left the spot, I never would have found it again in that grass. And my parents would have killed me for losing it." Now, I'm telling you, when you're in the big game and you live with that much fear of your parents, you got a problem. Let your kids fail. They're going to lose things. Hey, I remember when Matt flushed my watch down a toilet. I said, "Why did you do that?" He said, "I just wanted to see what it would look like going down." Did I spank him? No. In fact, I wish I'd have been there. I'd like to see what it looked like when he was going down. Allow for a little growing, for a few experiments. Number 8, you can provoke your children to anger by neglect. If there's any biblical illustration of this, it's probably David and Absalom. David spent no time with him, no time shaping him, and Absalom ultimately hated his father with a passion, tried to pull a coup to dethrone his father and take his place. Neglect. And the worst kind of neglect, lack of consistent discipline. That's the worst kind of neglect. I'm not talking about the neglect of time and things. I'm talking about the neglect of discipline. Teach them, discipline them, consistently using the rod in love. Number 9, you can provoke your children to anger by abusive words. You understand that a little child has a very limited vocabulary and you have a very comprehensive one? Verbal abuse is a terrible thing. A barrage of well-chosen words from your adult vocabulary can cut that little heart to shreds. And what is as devastating as anything are words of anger, words of sarcasm, or words of ridicule. Frankly, we say things to our children we would never say to anybody else. And lastly, by physical abuse. An angry child is often a beaten, abused, overzealously punished child. Usually from an angry, vengeful parent who only cares that he has been inconvenienced or irritated, not that the child needs correction for his own good. Well, those are some very simple, practical things. If you want to provoke your child to anger, you can do it by overprotection, favoritism, setting unrealistic achievement goals, overindulgence, discouragement, failing to sacrifice for them so that they can see your love, failing to allow for them to grow up by neglecting firm, consistent, loving discipline, by abusive words and physical abuse as well. Don't do that. Turn to the positive with me. Rather, bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord, or the nurture and admonition of the Lord, as the Authorized says. Bring them up. They won't get there themselves, I might add hastily. You got to bring them up. They're not going to get there by themselves. You have to bring them up. Proverbs 29:15 says, a child left to himself brings his mother shame. And that is what I told you earlier. It is not what parents do to children so much, although obviously if they do things that are abusive and painful, it has effects. But it is what parents do not do that exasperates children. The lack of discipline, the lack of love, the lack of care. You must bring them up. This is a call to raise your children, to focus on it. Now, let me give you some practical instruction at this point. How do you do this? How do you bring your child up? What is the real key to this challenging work? I'm going to give you the key. Proverbs 4:23 says, watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life. Now, what you have here is a clear-cut, divinely inspired statement that the issues of life come out of the heart. All the matters of life proceed from the heart. In Mark 7 and verse 21, Jesus said, for from within, out of the heart of men, proceed the evil thoughts, fornications, thefts, murders, adulteries, deeds of coveting and wickedness, as well as deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. All these evil things proceed from within. And the same thing essentially is recorded for us in Luke chapter 6 and verse 45. The good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth what is good, and the evil man out of the evil treasure brings forth what is evil. For his mouth speaks from that which fills his heart. Now, what you want to recognize with your child is this. You have a heart problem. You're not dealing with behavioral issues. You're dealing with the heart. In fact, let me go beyond that and say behavior is not the crucial issue. Changing your child's behavior is not the crucial issue. In fact, a change in behavior without a change in heart is nothing but hypocrisy. It is a sham. Because the sin and the rebellion is still there and is only delayed as to its expression. All behavior, all conduct is linked to some heart condition, some heart attitude. And parents, listen, your task as parents is to set yourself to the heart of the child.
That's Grace to You with John MacArthur, president of the Masters University and Seminary. Today he explained what it means to